Very good evening. Welcome to James Whale Breaks the News on TV and the James Whale Show, of course, on Talk Radio, live until 10 this evening. The first hour, as always, is on television, and we are here. You can see us on YouTube, you can see us on Twitter, on Facebook, on every other conceivable social media platform. The interesting thing about television, I'll tell you, is normally you expect all your guests to turn up about half an hour, maybe an hour before the show, and then you get mic'd up and everybody has a cup of tea or a glass of, well, whatever, really. I'd rather have a gin and tonic at this moment, but there we are. So here we are. They all turned up about 30 seconds just before we started, which is slightly annoying. Anyway, let me introduce you to the panel. They are Mr. Johnny Gould, broadcaster extraordinaire and wearer of funny shirts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Habib, who is from the Brexit Party. He is an MEP, and he's very smart this evening. Thank you very much indeed. We have Alice Grant, who is here from Action for Life, and we'll find out what that is a little later, but she is a YouTube sensation. Is that right?
Thank you very much.
Yes. And beside me here is a man who strikes fear into every climate protester on the planet, Mr. Piers Corbyn. And of course, over here, and if he does lots of CND and hippie stuff, you just have to bear with it. Over on the other side of the studio, we have, of course, Ricky the Remainer looking after the all the social media and stuff like that.
Good evening, James.
Good evening, Ricky.
Well, if you want to tweet us, you can do so.
Yeah, you
at
tell them
Talk
how
Radio.
they do it. That's
you can
it.
message us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and of course Periscope as well.
Good. So, get on to that. Let's talk about climate change to begin with. Today, there has been a massive protest, not just here in the UK, but all over the world. And apparently, I don't know if it's 11 months or if it's 11 years. But before we talk about it, let me just say, we must extrapolate, actually, the reality of climate change and of saving the planet. I am very keen on saving the planet. I believe in climate change. I want to make one point that nobody's made. You know, 20 years ago, you walked down the street and you probably stepped in dog mess or something like that. You saw dogs. We suddenly took a turn and realised that that is not an acceptable way to behave. It doesn't happen anymore. We are beginning to do the same with plastic, and I recycle. I think the rubbish, particularly compared with some other European nations in this country, is appalling, and I'm all for recycling and making things as clean as we can. But I want to talk about climate change. I want to talk about if we really are on borrowed time. Are there only 11 months left to go? Or maybe in 11 years? To me, it won't really matter. It'll matter to Alice, and we'll talk to Alice in a moment. Johnny Gould, it doesn't really matter to you because you, like me, are getting on.
Knocking on a bit, but listen, I preferred this discussion when it was the dear old Ecology Party because it was stripped away and not politicised. And so when Jonathan Porritt used to rock up on television with 2% of the vote, it was the Ecology Party, and it was, as you described, recycling. Think about what you're doing to the environment. And that's what I appreciate. I am an ecologist. I do believe in not buying the chocolate eclairs with the sort of moulded plastic.
Have you stopped eating meat?
No, but that's
well,
a completely
should.
separate issue.
Well, no,
but that's the problem. This is where it becomes politicised. When we have this baggage on top where they call it climate change and saving the world and the terrible Extinction Rebellion traffic mob, you know, that is a turn-off for me, and that is not ecology. But when I go into the supermarket, yes, I don't want to use bags. I want to use recyclable things.
Right.
I believe in ecology, not the kind of periphery around
All right.
it.
Alice, tell me about your thoughts, because you've been quite outspoken about this, but you are exactly the right age to be concerned about how we treat the planet.
Well, I am an environmentalist, and I do believe it is our duty to protect and care for our Earth for future generations. But I believe this climate alarmism, which is peddled endlessly in schools and in all sorts of institutions, is doing nothing but harm. Instead, it's creating anxiety in young children, and I believe it's a form of child abuse. I've seen videos where children are hysterical and crying over this, believing that the world is going to end, when really that is not the case.
I mean, we are messing the world up, though, aren't we? I mean, we are, we're pouring out pollutants all over the world. We have overpopulated the planet. We are doing some harm.
I don't believe it's the people who are doing harm. I believe it's the mega corporations, the big money multinationals, which are really destroying the earth. And this climate change emergency is being used to divert our attention from these real problems that we face, such as plastic pollution or the deforestation of the Amazon.
Do you think that there should be demonstrations outside some of these huge corporations then, who you believe are...
Exactly. There is a big problem, and it's not going to be solved by giving our tax money to the EU or to the government. That's only going to transfer wealth from the poor people of this nation and the hard-working, ordinary taxpayers, again, to the establishment and to the government and to the elite. So,
Ben, what do you think about it?
Well, I think Alice is spot on. You know, a lot of the steps taken by government to address the issue manifest themselves eventually in taxes, one way or another. And those taxes effectively hit the poorest the most, and they hit businesses. And they're very regressive. So I'm completely with Johnny. We need to take a kind of ecologist's pragmatic view, switch the lights off, don't use unnecessary plastic, conserve energy. It's all good for your back pocket. Just be normal and get on with it. And the other thing I agree with Alice on is that this alarmist thing is self-defeating. Because if you think the whole planet's going to come to a halt in 10 years' time, you won't bother actually trying to do anything to save the planet. You're just going to give up, throw your hands up in horror and think, well, the whole thing's a disaster, and do nothing. And I think we need a much more measured approach. And the last thing I'd like to say is that actually, you know, it's not the United Kingdom that's the biggest polluter on this planet. The biggest polluters are China, India, and of course the US. You know, so why are we beating ourselves down so dramatically?
Well, I believe everybody is now. I mean, this is an international crisis. That the children are all over the world on the streets. Let's talk to Piers, because Piers, you are a very unpopular person. I tried to get some people from the demonstration side to come onto the programme.
They wouldn't talk to us. Well,
they love me, but it's you, Piers, they didn't want to talk to.
Indeed.
What they say, I'll tell you, what they say is the science is proved. We don't need to talk about the science anymore.
Yes.
Now, Piers, are you a scientist?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a physicist. I got a first-class degree in physics from Imperial College, and I got an MSc in astrophysics. And I've done a lot of research into climate, the weather, and we do long-range weather forecasting. I'm also a meteorologist.
So why are you so unpopular?
Well, because they are peddling something which is untrue, and they do not have an answer. Like, we tried them on the demonstration today. We were speaking, we said man-made climate change doesn't exist, and they start screaming. And then we said, tell us what you want. And we gave people the microphone, and they wouldn't even speak.
We must be polluting the planet, Piers.
Well,
I mean, from everything we do, just existing.
Pollution is one thing, and climate change is something. Man-made climate change does not exist.
But not even with all the cars and the trains and the planes and the...
Carbon dioxide levels are an effect, not a cause of climate. I.e., the world gets warmer and then the sea will emit carbon dioxide. The world gets colder and the sea can absorb carbon dioxide. But there's a lag of about 800 years because of the underneath the sea ocean currents take so long to get through. So the extra
Could
CO2
you prove
now,
any of this, Piers?
Yes. If people go to this QR code, an article in the...
It just looks like somebody's done a bit of modern art.
I know, but it's a QR code, and you can get that instantly.
For those listening on the radio, Piers is holding up a sort of thing.
A thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you
get
a QR code and download,
you'll have to
it's a
look
barcode.
on Twitter.
Well, the actual HTTP site is on there anyway.
But anyway, let's get
that
up. Right.
It explains there, and it's published by the Debating Society of the University of Reading, where we show there how it is.
You weren't thrown out of there.
No.
You weren't non-platformed, or?
I'm not being thrown out of anywhere. It explains there how that CO2 levels are an effect, not a cause of climate change.
But
the theory of climate change breaks the first and second laws of thermodynamics, and that is detailed in there.
Right. Let's talk about climate change, because climates change.
Climates have always changed. For millions of years, climates have changed, and the CO2 levels follow temperatures. And the cause of the climate is basically sea temperatures and the
But
way
we
the jet
must be
stream
doing
operates.
something. I mean, the amount of cars on the roads now, there must be some problem.
Well,
surely.
we're making a little bit more CO2, which is actually making plants grow faster. But the reason CO2 is the gas of life, and we want more, not less. Millions of years ago, there was a lot more CO2.
I don't know what you think
We
out
want
there
more
who are
CO2,
listening or
not
watching
less.
us tonight. More CO2. I mean, don't you
We
know?
want more CO2.
Yeah, right.
If you
fine.
double CO2 levels, plants will increase their growth rate by
Right.
40%.
Let's see what our
That'll
viewers
be
and
a
listeners-
boom for agriculture.
Okay, well,
and
let's-
that's what farmers do. Tomato farmers put CO2 in the greenhouses to make the tomatoes grow faster.
I had tomato sandwiches for my tea.
And in Carboniferous times,
I feel
there
myself
were
growing.
huge extra amounts of CO2, hundreds of
Okay,
tons maybe.
let's go to Ricky
And that was
and find
very,
out
very
what our
careful.
viewers and listeners are saying. I kind of don't really want to hear, but okay, Ricky, go on.
Well, it's getting very, very active on social media, so do make
Good.
sure you get involved. You can tweet us at Talk Radio, you can message us on Facebook Live or on YouTube. We'll start off with Sam on YouTube Live. He says, during the medieval warm period, it was several degrees hotter than today, despite there not being any industrial pollution, no cars and a world population, just a fraction of what it is today. Any ideas of why that might be?
Yes.
Piers, why might that be?
Well, it was
supposedly,
warmer
in your
then
opinion?
because solar activity was higher. And there's a good correlation in smoothed out sense over decades between solar activity and world temperatures. And that warming of the upper ocean put lots of extra CO2 in the atmosphere. There was also some melting of Greenland, and that cold water then got subducted under the sea in the Atlantic, and it's taken 500 or 800 years to come out again,
But
going
you're
under the
simply
sea,
one of the
out
only-
in the Pacific, and that's why we've got that extra CO2.
You're one of the very
It's
few
subducted
climate
from-
experts.
Just a minute, Ricky.
I'm a climate
he's
expert,
just finished.
yes, I am.
Yes, Ricky,
You're
go
one
on.
of the very few climate experts which really goes for the ocean. Seeing as 97% of the world's leading climate experts all agree that global
No,
warming
they
is
don't.
happening because
That
of
is a falsity as well.
No, I think what
The
you're
answer
saying is a
to
falsity.
That percentage is 0.3% of the
Where's
scientists
that
that wrote
fact come
a box
from?
of scientific papers. 0.3% of them said that they believed or understood that man was
Okay,
more
here's
than
here's
was
the question.
responsible for 50% of warming. The rest said nothing at all.
Alice
nothing
wants
at all.
to say
They're
something.
collecting money to research into climate.
Right, Piers, just a moment. Let's Alice
they
speak.
were.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but in fact the IPCC report, which all climate alarmists allude to, is in fact created in order to strengthen the climate change emergency. That's the reason why it was created. It was basically commissioned by the UN so that scientists could strengthen this position and, peddle
Yeah.
more
Why
propaganda.
would they do that?
They're doing that because ultimately this is about money. They want our money.
Why
They want
would
our
they-
taxes.
But hang
academic want to do
on.
that.
I have interviewed lots of people, and even though I may disagree sometimes with what they're saying, but they seem very sincere, a lot of these scientists. They
Well,
seem...
they're sincerely wrong.
Johnny,
When my question about 91% of scientists think this, 96% of scientists
it's
think
untrue, and
that.
none of
But
them.
when did science ever become a consensus thing?
Hooray!
It's not faith-based.
Excellent.
It's not the great new religion.
No.
It's either science fact or it's science fiction. It's either right or wrong.
And if
So
that's what
whether there's a
97%
consensus
are
the world
saying-
is flat,
minute.
we
One
got
at a
over
time.
that, and now the world is flat again with climate change.
Ricky,
Yes, I would like to know. So let's say
Consensus
NASA.
has never advanced science.
hold on,
Never.
hold on, both of you. Ricky would like to say
When it comes to
something.
NASA,
Ricky
I
the
would trust
Remainer.
NASA with my life to get me to space.
Would
They're the
you?
only people. Yes, I would. You wouldn't go
A lot of
anywhere
them
else.
died on the way.
You trust science for when it comes to medicine, travelling around
Yeah.
the world, going to space, and yet suddenly when it comes to climate, 97% of scientists say one thing and Piers Corbyn says another.
No, 97% don't say that. I've already told you. It's
I know you have, and I
0.3%.
think
would
that's
you,
wrong.
Ricky,
There's a
will you
scientific
That's not
paper
true.
published which rips apart the paper, so-called, that you are talking. Look, it's a media construct. It's made up by the globalist media, which is making 24/7 propaganda for the
All right.
globalists.
Ricky,
to
concentrate
control
on
you.
social media for a moment.
Climate change
Piers, just a
policies
minute.
control you.
I want
not
to find
climate.
out what the European Union are going to do about this. Ben.
Well, the European Union are terrible on climate change. They don't have any joint-up thinking at all. So, for example, we get back in this country £3 billion towards common agricultural policy per annum. Actually, nothing could be more damaging to the environment than artificially and unnecessarily ploughing the land up and growing stuff that doesn't need to be grown, leaving fields fallow. In fact, that money would be much better spent, whether or not you believe in anthropomorphic climate change, that money would be much better spent reforesting, for example, where there's a demonstrable creation of oxygen. So the European Union is terrific at grandstanding and banging the drum and saying, we believe in environmentally sustainable solutions to everything. But actually, when it comes down to it, they're not really that good at it.
Piers has just whispered, reforesting's a good idea, very good idea.
You could plant loads more trees to remove man's CO2. And we're completely in favour of that. If you're worried about man's CO2, plant trees. But don't stop people flying. Don't stop people eating meat. Plant trees. However, what will happen if you plant lots of trees and gobble up the CO2, when the CO2 trees die, they produce CO2. So you'll have to grab the trees and drop them in a crevasse or something. But, OK, you could do that. However, the sea will respond by just giving out more CO2. So the sea rules. Yeah. There's 50 times more CO2 in the sea than in the land. Right. So you can't win. You can't win against the sea.
Why are we not, as a planet, doing something to make ourselves ready for the eventual climate change, which, if we look back through history, has always happened?
It has always happened, and the climate change coming is cooling. And the jet stream has shifted further south in the northern hemisphere, so we're getting more extremes. We're getting some very extreme cold winters and some short hot spells in summers, which are all part of the wild jet stream, which is an effect of the very low solar activity we're in. And this autumn and winter, there's going to be a lot of snow in Britain and in Western Europe, and the climate change science deniers, these are Extinction Rebellion, will want to deny it snowing, I dare say, but it is going to snow, and we predicted it because we understand how the climate works, whereas they don't.
It's climate change and it's getting extreme, and that's what people are saying.
Look, 10 years ago, I said at the Grain and Allied Feed Trades Association conference in Geneva what was coming. There was one, yes, a long time ago. Well, I go to them quite often and explained there's going to be more wild jet stream and it's going to get generally colder. And there'll be lots of effects of this mini ice age, little ice age coming, one of which is increased hailstorms. And you've probably noticed a lot more stories in the news about increased hailstorms damaging soft fruits.
Let us finally, on this part of the show, let's find out what is happening as far as social media is concerned. Remember, this is on Talk Radio Live. It's also being streamed around the internet live as well. You can find us. Where can they find it, Ricky?
They can find us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, on Twitter and Periscope as well.
Good.
Would you like some responses on what people are saying on social media?
I would love some tweets and some whatever you've got.
Well, a lot of people on YouTube Live are really going down the pollution road, really separating climate change and pollution, which I get the point, because I'd also like to see, tidy streets and no plastic wrappers in our rivers. Which
I wonder why. Here's a question for people listening or watching this programme. Why is it if you go to the rest of the continent, it's quite often a heck of a lot cleaner than it is over here? You land in Dover or wherever you go, you drive up our motorways and you see junk in the middle. You don't see that so much anywhere else. Why don't we clear stuff up? Sorry, Ricky.
That's all right. So a lot of people also talking about banning takeaway boxes and such like. So a lot of people talking about pollution, which is good. And Lincoln Hawk has just said it's arrogant to think that we can do anything about climate change, which I think he is absolutely incorrect. We've got 11 months to save the world, and I'm going to start as soon as I get home.
Right, thank you very much.
I was saying 11 years, not 11 months.
We will.
The figures are complete. It's complete nonsense.
We will come back.
It's going to be here in a million years' time.
We will come back. We might not be.
On it.
We'll be dead.
There'll be an ice age then.
Yeah. We will come back after the break, Piers, to talk more about climate change, and we will talk a little about Brexit because everybody else seems to be as well. Don't go anywhere. James Whale Show on Talk Radio till 10 tonight, and also if you're watching us on YouTube or on Twitter or on any other form of social media, you can see the programme as well. This part of it, which is a TV show too, James Whale breaks the news. We're breaking the stories behind the news. Climate change is the big one. With me in the studio today talking about this, Piers Corbyn from Weather Action and Alice Grant from Action for Life. We have Ben Habib, who is a Brexit Party MEP, and Johnny Gould, who just goes around wearing very loud shirts and looking very attractive.
I don't need to speak.
And over there, we have Ricky the Remainer, who Actually, somebody said to me the other day, that Ricky looks a bit like a bank manager. And
Well,
now I
Remainers
can
are
see
bank
it.
managers.
Yeah, I can see that. Alice, you're 17. You are very involved now in this campaign called Action for Life, which seems to me to be going against the grain, really. Explain to me what it is.
So Action for Life is a youth movement, really, because I've started this with some of my friends and I'm getting them involved. And it was all inspired by Pierce, really, because we must combat this toxic politics of climate alarmism, because it's really just politics of fear and guilt and fear-mongering. And I think it's really dangerous.
But we
creating
have to
so
look
much-
after the
yeah.
planet, Alice. I mean, we have to make sure that we don't damage the planet. I mean, if we were to have a nuclear war, for argument's sake, next week, hopefully we won't, that's going to damage the planet as well. So all kinds of things that man can do to damage the planet that we must be concerned about,
No,
surely.
certainly. I am an environmentalist, and I do believe that we must protect and care for our planet and the rainforests and the biodiversity and the people, of course. But this is basically combating or debunking the myth that CO2 is this poisonous gas and it's our fault that the Earth is going to die in 12 years. That's just simply nonsense, and that's what we're peddled. That's what we're told in school all the time. And really, this is just creating an enormous amount of anxiety to my generation, who already suffer from pressures of exams and things, and it's not helping the situation at all.
Why, Piers, you're the scientist amongst us, why have we got this big thing about carbon? I mean, we are all carbon, are we
Yes.
not? This is a carbon-based
Well,
planet.
You believe it or not, in the IPCC documents from some years ago, they said we need something to control people, and climate alarmism will help us do it. And
Using fear to
and that
control us.
the reason,
Do we have any proof of this?
yes,
Sounds like a mad conspiracy.
No, it's not.
Absolute
Wait,
mad
fucking
conspiracy.
quote
Is there anywhere we
Yes.
could go
Yes.
online and look it
Yes.
up? And I'll get Ricky the Remainer,
Yes.
who's very good at that, to do it now.
go on to weatheraction.com.
I'm not going onto your website.
okay.
No, I'm not going on your website.
Well, okay, weatheraction.com. No,
Maybe
no.
just Google
But we
Agenda
go into one of our
21.
presentations there and go through it. And
not
this
going through one of your
particular quote,
presentations.
No, I'll
this
get
particular
Alice.
quote is available on there from Edom Hoffenmer, I think his name was.
I'll go to the UN's website, shall I? I'll find it that way.
Yeah,
You may
look
do.
up
You
Agenda
may.
21.
Agenda
Agenda
21.
21, right.
But anyway, look, I
Do
think
that, hang
young
on.
people
Yeah.
have to get a grip of what's around them,
Right.
because they're told wind farms
Yeah.
are saving the planet. Actually, wind
They're
farms
not. That's
are
so
very
true.
CO2 large footprint because of the cost of all that steel in there, and they're killing birds and bats and bees at an alarming rate. That ought to be stopped. What we should be doing is having cheaper energy supplies like coal. We should be burning coal, and of course catching the smoke. With modern technology, you can remove the smoke and have efficient energy.
I don't want to go back to the
energy
miners' strike.
policies, which
yeah.
are going to be
Okay.
at home
All right,
rather than
Piers.
controlled by others
Right,
through
Piers,
importing
Piers,
energy
I wanna
from
get,
Russia.
Yeah, all right. I want to get an idea on this from Ben. Do you think that the European Union, I mean, I don't know how much longer we're going to be in the European Union, and you might be out of a job. We'll come back and talk about that
Good,
later.
yeah.
But do you believe anything that Piers is saying? Or?
Well, I'd love to believe what Piers is saying. My last sort of brush with science was university, where I did organic chemistry in 1987. And I haven't really stayed up with my sciences. And I haven't got the courage to argue in the way that Piers has with the anthropomorphic climate-based change movement. And so I take the view
because
really
they're
that
quite
John is-
strong. If you
They're very
argue
strong.
against them, you are likely to be
They're very
sent
strong,
to Coventry, I
you know,
suppose.
and the principal purpose of my political existence
Money.
is to get Brexit over the line, and I don't want to be distracted down a cul-de-sac, which
Maybe-
I may not emerge. But
Yeah.
I'm not brave enough to come out against climate change. I'd love to believe what Piers is saying, but I do think that whether or not anthropomorphic climate change, carbon-based climate change, is true is kind of academic. We should be ecologically orientated. We mustn't panic.
fair enough.
We should put in policies which are sensible and create a genuinely sustainable basis on which this planet can go forward with confidence. Remove the anxiety that clearly the younger generation is experiencing. Tax more sensibly. Put money more sensibly in places where it would be best served. And just not have this whole
it's funny,
panic
isn't
thing.
it, Ben? I mean, it's not like talking to a member of UKIP talking to a Brexit MP anymore. I mean, it's strange, isn't it? Johnny, Who was a
I
UKIPper?
am
I
old
know,
enough, and I think Ben and I might be of a similar vintage, to have seen the steady politicisation of the ecology, which has become something else. In the 1989 European election, I actually voted for the newly named Green Party because it was a good idea. I would never, ever vote for those clowns now. Never.
Say
because
what you
they are
think.
off of the scale.
Johnny, say what you think.
Politically, they are, let's all live in a cave and let's all be fascists. And totally, totally.
Slightly over the top.
I think that's what they are. I think they are hard right, whatever they are. But in the olden days, when they believed about packaging and polythene and strangling turtles in 1987, that seemed like a jolly good idea.
Shall we have a bit of balance from our Green Party supporter in the studio this evening?
Here we go.
Ricky the Remainer.
No, I just want to pick up on what Johnny just said there.
Not
that I would say that Ben and I are probably on opposite ends of the political spectrum. However, I kind of admire what you're saying, that you're not brave enough to be an outright climate change denier, as other people on this panel might be tonight.
No, we don't deny climate change.
What do you do then?
Man-made.
There's
No, we're all
no
talking
such
about
thing. Man-made climate change is a
Yes.
fiction. Look, CO2 is only 4% of the total CO2, which is only 0.04%. So we're told that 4% of 0.04%
All right,
is
hang on.
changing.
You're talking
It's
numbers again,
nonsense.
Piers.
All right,
It's
Piers,
like,
Piers,
it's like a
Piers.
blob of
Piers.
wood, of
Piers.
pigeon
Yes.
dropping
Piers.
on the top of Big Ben Tower.
I need
That
to-
Big
Piers,
Ben Tower.
Piers.
That is man's
Yeah, right, all right,
contribution
Piers.
of CO2 to the
You are
atmosphere.
frightening me now. Right, Ricky.
The point being that what Johnny's picking up on, that it's been politicised. If you look across the political spectrum, every single party is doing something on climate change. There's, in some ways, I thought Michael Gove was actually a fantastic Environment Secretary. And again, I don't agree on Michael Gove on anything he says. I don't agree with it. But on climate change, I thought he was actually very, very good. So I don't think it's been politicised at all. I think it's something that the entire political spectrum is getting behind.
Do you not think we need to have this debate more with people from both sides? But if the other side now are frightened to come off and say anything apart from Piers, and then you can't shut him up, but don't you think that we should be having the debate?
Oh, I always think we should have the debate. Every
Because I
single
would
time.
love to have scientists come on and talk to me about it. I would love to hear what they have to say. I would love to have them in debate with Piers or people like Piers, and there are other scientists like Piers.
Yeah, and
but
I think that's part of the
unfortunately,
problem.
they say, the other scientists say, science has been done. It's been proved. Let's just move on.
Yeah, well, that's progress, isn't it? That's what you work at something, you get to some form of conclusion, which 97% of scientists are saying, and then you move on.
That's untrue.
Piers
You
is
can withdraw
a
it.
discredited
It's
scientist
untrue.
in the
It's
scientific
untrue.
community.
Ricky,
That's why they
go
won't
on to
debate
this.
Ricky,
him.
you're
That's
upsetting
untrue.
Piers.
It's explained on there.
And he's old
Go
enough
If
to
to
you
look
that
are
the
QR.
paper
it
up
takes you to
again.
Piers' website,
Right.
is going to do a lot of good.
Now, Ricky, I would like to
Robertson.com,
hear
yes,
from
go
our
on then.
viewers and listeners.
And-
Thank you.
We'll start off with John Middleton, who's probably got the tweet of the evening, and he says, reduce your Corbyn footprint. Very good, John. Big fan of that. Ted has got a bit more of a scathing view. Ted Martin on Facebook, he says, let's turn off all the school's heaters this winter. That'll teach those pesky climate change kids.
That's very naughty.
James has tweeted, he says, 4 Brexiteers and 4 climate change deniers. Just turn the lights off. Fantastic solution. Can't believe none of us have thought of that before.
Well, at least you're watching, and I think that's very unfair because then the debate goes nowhere and there is no democracy. And as far as I know, nobody on this panel is actually denying climate change. One more message.
Changes in climate.
Just a very quick one. This is from Lambert. He says, what's Christopher Biggins doing at the end of the table?
That's very rude. Obviously means James.
No. No, they say, I was out the other night and somebody said, listen, Harry, could I get your autograph? I said, who do you think I am? It's Harry Hill. I watch you all the time. Wasn't very happy at all, really. You haven't said anything about this before we move on to another topic? Did you want to say any more or not?
What about Harry Hill? Or?
No. Do you want to say any more about climate change?
I think I've said I've said my bunch.
Good, okay, fine. I think we'll move on from climate. We'll come back to it. It'll all be mixed up, don't worry. Now, Luxembourg Prime Minister insulted our Prime Minister. And it was actually quite embarrassing. Whether you like our Prime Minister, dislike him, it's really the position. And I watched it and I was really embarrassed. And I thought, well, I can't tell you what I thought anyway. What did you think?
Yes, it caused a diplomatic upstage, but basically because Luxembourg is such a small and insignificant economy in the European Union, And Britain is about to become a client of the European Union, and they are approximately, the second biggest economy, soon to be the biggest economy, bigger than Germany, if we can get ourselves through Brexit and turn into Singapore.
Do you know the most entertaining thing I thought was how The Guardian, that well-known socialist newspaper, was championing Luxembourg, probably the biggest capitalist country on the planet.
Yes.
Do they
Where-
pay taxes in there?
Yeah.
Well, exactly.
The only good thing had to come out of Luxembourg was the Great 208, and that doesn't exist anymore.
No. Ben.
Well, here you have this tax haven. No one had heard of Bettel until the other day, so
No.
good move by Bettel to get his name known. But it was absolutely outrageous. This country is a 50th the size of the United Kingdom. But we've got this coming across from the European Union on an almost incessant basis now. You know, Donald Tusk, who's a kind of failed Polish politician, tells us that all Brexiteers are going to end up in hell. I mean, you know, where does he get off telling us where we're... What?
What, we're going to
No, that's enough. That's enough. Listen, what
know,
I want to know is this. When I was watching, when I was watching the debate in the Chamber the other day, there were hardly any MEPs in there. That was the Brexit debate. There was nobody in there.
All 29 Brexit Party MEPs were there. Quite a few of the other, what you might regard as Eurosceptic parties were there. The Lib Dems were nowhere to be seen. And this is a party that champions Remain. Most of the Labour Party weren't there. Most of the Irish parties who also champion Remain weren't there. And what these MEPs do is they turn up for their 1 minute slot, because you can only ever talk for a maximum of 1 minute.
That wouldn't do beers any good at all, would it? No, you wouldn't be able to be
No,
an E MEP.
I'd hold up a QR code. It'd be all right.
They turn up for their 1 minute slot, make their speech, get it filmed, tweet it out, and they've done their day's business, with the exception of coming back to vote on completely meaningless motions at the end of the day. But they do that.
Well, they're paid to do that, aren't they?
Well, they don't get paid if they don't do it.
Well,
So they're all in the
that's a
chamber.
clever
They're
way.
all in the chamber for the vote, so they can pick up their 320 euros. And so you would have seen the chamber. The only time the chamber is full is when we're voting. I mean,
That's our taxpayers' money as well.
but the joke about it is, whatever we decide in the European Parliament is entirely academic. It's merely grandstanding in gestures. They don't actually have any legally binding effect.
What are you going to do when you lose your job?
Well, luckily, I'm chief executive of a property company as well, and I'll go back to doing my day job.
But isn't it going to ruin the economy of this country, and then nobody will be able to afford to get a house or anything?
Well, I wrote an article today on Project Fear, and I think Project Fear is now terminally ill. You might recall that when we started with Project Fear, just a vote for Brexit was going to result in 1 million jobs being lost, a severe recession, and Osborne, who clearly is economically illiterate, was going to compound the problem by raising taxes and raising interest rates and all. He promised it. He said more austerity, more austerity. If we hit a recession, I'm going to hurt you even more. I mean, that is so economically illiterate. But anyway, no recession came along. We've added 1 million jobs to the British economy. Wage growth has taken hold.
A lot of those jobs are not really very good jobs, though, are they? A lot of those jobs are sort of part-time jobs. And
James, I'd expect better of you. That's a kind of Remainer response to good news.
I used to be a Remainer.
Yeah, okay.
I started life as a Remainer, and then I saw the error of my ways. We'll come back and talk about that in a moment. Don't go anywhere. If you want to join us, go on Twitter. You could tweet us. You could Facebook us. You can... what else could they do to us? You could Periscope us as well. We'll be right back after this. I'll show you if you... Welcome back on Talk Radio Live, and of course here on the television as well, on Periscope, on Facebook, on YouTube, and you name it, we're on it. Right, Ricky the Remainer is of course with me, and he's got some of your comments flooding into the show tonight. Ricky.
Yeah, so these are kind of a roundup of all the ones we've had over the last kind of 10 minutes or so. So they're fairly scattergunned. We'll start off with Daniel. He says, where were the protests on gangs and knife crime? Which I think is a
very
fairly
good point.
A good
Very
point,
good
well
point,
made.
yeah.
Lizzie has said, because obviously you can't go 5 metres without seeing a climate scientist in a Ferrari, in reference to Piers has mentioned that apparently it's this corporate conspiracy.
Has
that
Piers
all
got a Ferrari?
No,
Have you got a Ferrari?
No, but all the ones that apparently believe in climate change have, allegedly.
The other ones.
Trager says, we live in a state with no free speech and deranged lefties, which I think is a reference to me. Thank you, Trager. I'm glad you're listening. And Julie Smith, she says, do I support truancy? Absolutely not. I hope all these parents allowing their children to truant are being fined by the schools. I hope the teachers there are being disciplined for taking the day off too.
Okay. Might talk about that on the radio as well in the next hour of the show. Right, let's talk a bit more about Brexit. I shouldn't do this, Piers, but...
You were going to do climate just now.
Was I? Oh, I'm going to do Brexit now. Then we'll do climate in a minute. So we'll finish with climate, and that'll be all right with you, won't it?
I've got more to say.
Yeah, I know, but, you could be here for 24 hours and we never get it all
do,
out of you.
yeah.
People may not know this, but your brother is leader of the Labour Party, and possibly the next Prime Minister.
The next Prime Minister. I hope so.
What is he going to do about Brexit? Because nobody is particularly sure.
Well, look, I can't speak for my brother, but he carry out Labour Party policy. But I do know that whatever happens, if we're in or out after October the 31st, there's going to have to be ongoing negotiations with the European Union. And Jeremy Corbyn, my brother, will be the best to do that, because he'll speak for the many rather than the few, which is what Boris Johnson would do. Even though Boris Johnson agrees with me on climate change, or he did before he became Prime Minister.
Well, and when you
Before
become Prime Minister, you probably find out anyway, Piers, you can't do all the things you think you were going to do before you become Prime Minister.
That may be
What
true.
do you think he will do if he becomes Prime Minister? And ask him if he'll come on my show sometime, because he's always saying no. Right. Tell him you were treated very fairly.
I was.
Yeah.
So far.
What will he do about climate change?
Well, I don't know, because he's got to follow Labour Party policy. However, let's be clear, the Climate Change Act of 2008 says that as the science changes, the measures will change. Now, the science has changed, because we know the jet stream has come further south. We're getting more of these extremely cold winters, and also more short hot spells, which are all part of low solar activity.
Will he put you perhaps in as a position of government advisor to Prime Minister Corbyn?
I don't know. If he wants advice from me, I'm always happy to offer it. But look, he has to run his own ship.
Yes. Right. Okay.
And, yes. But I think if we want to talk more about climate, that it's important to know, and this hasn't been on the BBC.
Yeah. No, I'm going to do that in a minute.
You're going to do that in a minute? Okay.
I want to go.
Brexit now,
I want to go back to Alice about the Luxembourg Prime Minister. Do you have any views on that? Do young people, because we're told that young people all want to remain in the European Union, as, because I'm a young person, I did to begin this 3-year debacle, and I've changed my mind for all kinds of reasons.
Well, I think the majority of young people do support Remain, just purely because of the amount of propaganda and, teachers and parents too, especially in London. But
when we want the voice of the Remainer, we'll come to you, Ricky.
But personally, through my activism, my pro-Brexit activism, I found a lot of young people who do support Leave, and I've been getting lots of messages on social media, other young people saying, thank you for standing up for Brexit, and I can't come out as a Brexiteer in my school because I would be harassed, but I really appreciate what you're doing.
What would you do in the future? Do you think you would consider becoming a politician or not?
Not really. I would love to be a barrister, really.
You want to be a barrister?
Yeah.
No.
Well, they usually end up in Parliament anyway.
Barista. That's a barista.
Tony Blair,
Yeah.
his wife.
Was he a barista as
Well,
well? I didn't know that.
Yeah, Tony Blair's a barrister. Keir Starmer, something like that.
Ricky,
James?
any views coming in?
Oh, yeah, plenty.
Well, give us...
honestly. KNM84, this is still on climate change. He says you're more likely to be stabbed to death than be a victim of climate change, which is interesting because as the glaciers continue to melt and more of the world becomes flooded, they will be. They will be flooded, and more people
Jacob's
will
Harvard
die.
Glacier, the biggest and most important glacier in the world in Greenland, is getting longer.
That's not true, is it?
Hang on.
True.
What do you mean not true?
Because
have you got proof?
Yes,
have you got proof?
Yes,
go to space, go into a satellite, look at what
if
NASA are
you'll
looking
pay,
at,
I'll go,
and
yeah.
you'll see that the glaciers and that the Antarctic ice, they're shrinking.
Hang
It's gone
on,
down by
that's untrue.
40%.
Hold on!
Untrue.
I am now confused. One of you is not telling the truth. Is it getting bigger or is it getting smaller?
Well,
who do I
I'm
believe?
going to go with the 97% of scientists.
No, it's no 97% of scientists.
Yes,
Here's
there
the
are.
graph, there's a map here. This is IPCC data showing
Back
that
to
the
your website.
Arctic has actually got bigger, the ice in the Arctic, over the last 10 years or so.
That
This
is
is
Or actually
nonsense.
6 years, I think. 2012,
hang-
2019.
Hang on, let me have a look.
7 years.
Right, okay. So that's 2019, that's 2012.
Yep.
I'll just cross the floor, as they do in Parliament quite often. There we are. I'll show that to Ricky,
Yeah.
so hopefully he will
That comes
know.
from proofexcites.com and friends of mine.
But I
in
can see that
Manchester.
you've put a different number over the top of it. Can we get a close-up on this, where it's a different font over the top? I don't know if you can see this, but there's clearly... Peter's put his
If you're
own
listening
font
on the radio,
top
you
of
will
it.
have to go to social
Absolute
media and have a
nonsense.
look.
What's he on about? I didn't produce this graph, but
Well, I know you didn't,
What are
because
you
you've
talking
redacted it, haven't
about?
you?
What
You've
are you
changed it,
talking
Okay,
Piers.
move on. We can't do that. It's no good for the radio. Yeah, you're
we're not
absolutely right.
typographers in here.
Yeah. Right. Where were we going now, producer? Remind me. Oh, right. Johnny.
Yes, Jane.
The Liberal Democrats. They could win the next election. Joe Swinson could be the next Prime Minister of this country. And actually, considering the first female Prime Minister of this country was probably, in my view anyway, and you may differ, the best Prime Minister we've had for a considerable amount of time.
Yes.
The sainted Margaret.
That's right.
Maybe Joe Swinson would do a good job.
Well, in Margaret Thatcher's words, no. No, they are the illiberal undemocrats. We voted, I'm going to say the same old things you always hear on the telly and the radio, 7.4 million, etc. And they are denying the once-in-a-generation referendum, which they got beaten on. And OK, they have got their voice, and there will be, 6 or 7 million people that may vote for them. It will split the Labour vote. Who are Labour? I don't know. But they're nice. I don't know what I am. It's all confusing.
What?
And but like, the Labour vote will
there
be
a nurse
confused.
standing by?
But this is the thing about the hard left takeover of the Labour Party. They're split down the middle in terms of Remain or Leave, and their idea, their coalition, which is of Northern Leavers and Metropolitan Trendy Remainers, as some kind of coalition, is a bit like Silk Cut cigarette sponsorships back in the 1980s, where they sponsored rugby league in the north and show jumping in the south. No chance. Absolutely
Can you
chance.
explain some of these things? Because Alice said she doesn't even remember Tony Blair being a Prime Minister.
Well, I wasn't
Yeah,
alive
well,
there.
yeah, him and Eunice
But
Stubbs
And
were
North
the
Show
effects,
jumping,
the
North
effects
Rugby
of his
League.
premiership.
Rugby league. Come on, this is
Ben.
very old stuff.
very
The Liberal Democrats are on a high. They have had more people join them recently than before ever.
Yeah, well, they cross the floor, as you said. I think
Yeah, joining.
they keep joining from other parties. Exactly.
Betraying somebody.
But Joe Swinson, she's less liberal than Maggie Thatcher was. Maggie Thatcher would be closer to liberal than Joe Swinson. She is the dictatorial side of Remain. It absolutely baffles me that without at least a second referendum, not that I'm advocating one, but at least not even with a second referendum, she now advocates to revoke Article 50.
But if we could get an election, which we were offered, and politicians turned it down, your brother didn't like the idea. If we'd had the election, we could have chosen who we wanted to vote for. And if everybody had gone out and voted for the Lib Dems, we would have known that they were in the right.
But she declined to have an election. And her MEPs, by the way, in Parliament a couple of days ago, accused Boris Johnson of being a dictator. Well, actually, dictators don't offer elections, and it was the Lib Dems that blocked it, along, I'm afraid to say, with your brother and his party. And
The Tories are trying to let themselves off the hook, weren't they? I mean, Brexit should be sorted first, then we can have an election on sensible things about where the country's going. For the economy, what are we doing with Britain? What the distribution of wealth, is it going to go more up or more down? I mean, what are we going to do?
Leave WTO terms on the 31st of October.
Brexit.
And then we can have an election after.
But isn't that going to ruin the country if we
No.
leave on WTO
Look,
rules?
their biggest fear of Remainers, the biggest fear of the people that say no to no deal when they really mean where they're opposed to Brexit. Their biggest fear is when we leave, they're going to be caught out because nothing will happen at all.
No.
The day one will be no change. All the measures have been made to sort out any problems. They're already in
And
place.
that's why I say Project Fear is terminally
Boris
ill.
has
That's
got
right.
10 days,
Yeah.
apparently. He's been given 10 days to sort this out. Can he do it?
10 days to save the world.
Well, the mood language, as it was described the other day in Brussels, is moving towards giving in on the backstop. And that is so fearful for me, because there is nothing worse than the withdrawal agreement in its entirety. Every single clause of the political declaration ties this country into knots around the EU. There would be no get-out mechanism. The withdrawal agreement is an evil document, and we must never sign up to it. So I'm
Okay.
desperately concerned about Boris getting rid of the backstop.
We've got to
The
make.
backstop's
Hang
a
on,
cover,
hang on.
So they withdraw it and then say,
And then
now
say
we'll
we've
have
sorted
this.
the problem.
But
in Moses.
whatever happens,
Withdraw
we
it and
must
you're still in the
try
prison.
to maintain peace in Ireland. We don't want it kicking off.
Yeah,
like I
but this is
remember
all
before.
just a story just to scare you. It's part of the
it's another story. And
Can
I
I,
think, yeah.
guys, believe it or not, I'm told that we are finishing. I can hear the music in my
God.
ears. Ricky, have
I
you
want to
got
show
a
this
couple
graph.
of...
I've got another graph.
Oh, you've got another graph. I've got-
I'll
Just
hold it
Ricky,
up.
talk quickly.
Well, there's a lot of Margaret Thatcher going down on YouTube Live at the moment. And we'll finish off with this from PS. He says, I don't support climate change, and to prove my point, I've left my Range Rover running all day on the drive. Really good stuff there,
Thank
PS.
you
Thanks
very
for
much
joining in.
indeed. We've come to the end. I will continue on Talk Radio after the news coming up, and we'll be back with James Hoyle breaks the news, not next week, but in 2 weeks' time. Enjoy the grass. Thank you very much.